Good morning, good afternoon, as the case may be, and welcome to Wholesale Change, where Distribution Strategy Group provides thought leadership for change agents just like you, because if you are on this webcast or podcast, you probably are a wholesale change agent. We have an absolutely fascinating topic and a special guest today, Dirk Beveridge, whom I will introduce in a couple of moments here. And our topic is going to be creating relevancy in an age of disruption. And we are certainly all living this age of disruption. I wanted to thank our sponsors without whom this work would not be possible. This is brought to you by three sponsors today: Oracle NetSuite, Bloomreach, and Zorro. Oracle NetSuite for more than 20 years has helped organizations grow, scale, and adapt to unpredictable changes with a unified true cloud platform. We especially enable fast-growing wholesale distribution companies to achieve operational excellence, manage margins and inventory, and support and expand their geographical footprint for years to come. NetSuite provides an integrated system that includes financials, ERP, HR management, CRM, professional services automation, and omnichannel commerce. Most notably, though, is our demand planning and advanced inventory management used by more than 28,000 customers in 215 countries and dependent territories. We've worked with HVAC, electronics, electrical, furniture, home goods, and industrial supply and equipment companies, just to name a few. NetSuite is a true cloud solution, best fit for your wholesale distribution company. Our next sponsor, Zorro. Zorro.com is an online B2B distributor offering millions and millions of products, an endless aisle where customers can find and buy more of what they need in one place. With fair pricing, quick delivery, and great customer service, Zorro exists to make customers' lives easier. What makes Zorro unique is that they build strong partnerships with distributor partners to provide products and fulfill orders. Zorro relies on its strong supplier partnerships to provide a great customer experience. In turn, Zorro makes it easy for those supplier partners to grow their business and expand their customer base online. If you're interested in growing your sales and share online, and you want a truly collaborative partnership, visit www.zorro.com/sell-on-Zorro for more information. And our third sponsor, Bloomreach, is the world's #1 commerce experience cloud, empowering distributors to deliver buyer journeys so personalized, they feel like magic. They offer a suite of products that drive true personalization and digital commerce growth, including discovery, offering AI-driven smart search and merchandising that works for all product lines, content, offering a headless CMS built for e-commerce, and engagement, offering a leading CDP and marketing automation solutions. Together, these Bloomreach solutions combine the power of buyer behavior and product data with the speed and scale of AI optimization, giving distributors differentiated digital commerce experiences that deliver ROI, drive revenue, and convert on any channel. So thank you, Oracle NetSuite, Bloomreach, and Zorro.com. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our special guest, Dirk Beveridge. Morning, Dirk.
Morning, Jonathan. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. What's going on in Chicago?
Oh, man, summer has arrived. Summer has arrived, and I think anywhere you look in Chicago right now, people are grinning from ear to ear. It's about time.
I got a great photo from my nephew taking his nieces and nephews to the Wrigley game the other night. So
Nice.
you know what a funkle is?
A Funkle? I don't.
It's the fun uncle. So if you have multiple uncles, the funkle is the one that's the fun one.
I love it. And,
Okay. So
you are the Funkle. You're going to be Funkle from now on, bud.
I try. So, Dirk, you've had an amazing career working with wholesale distributors. And I wondered if for the benefit of our audience, if you could just take us through, literally, college to now, what you've been doing and what you've been focused on. I think that would be really relevant for our listeners.
Wow. College till now, huh? That's a long time, man. That's going to take our whole hour. I mean, that's a lot of years, Jonathan.
You can do Cliff Notes if you want.
Yeah, okay, thank you. No, I appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate it. So after graduating from Western Illinois University, I went to work for a company called H.B. Fuller, and I carried a bag selling ceramic tile adhesives, caulks, and sealants to and through and with adhesive and ceramic tile distributors. And I did that up in the Boston area for a while. After a couple of years of doing that, I joined our family business. We are a second generation business. I joined my father. And Dad was going around this country as, I believe, one of the greatest motivational speakers in the history of motivational speaking. And so I joined the company. We became, as a consulting company, we focused on helping organizations develop customer-centric, value-oriented selling systems and coaching postured sales management. We did that for organizations like Morgan Distribution, Berlin Packaging over the years, and others. Then, after 9/11, I found myself on the deck of the USS George Washington, out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And on that deck, I met a gentleman by the name of Saul Kaplan, who has the Business Innovation Factory out in Providence, Rhode Island. And I went to his innovation factory, and I was sitting in there for 2 days, Jonathan. My mind was being blown. And you know the TED Talks?
Totally.
Yeah, so
Actually, the founder's son is based here in Boulder.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
And so Saul Kaplan had this innovation summit, and he had 30 different speakers coming across the stage. Nobody talking longer than 18 minutes. And the only thing they had in common was the word innovation. And I had an epiphany during that session, and I wrote down a note that said, innovation is bypassing distribution. And that moment, that spark of inspiration in that moment has really led my career for the last 12 years or so. And that led to us creating the only innovation summit for distributors, UnleashWD. It led to me working with the National Association of Wholesalers to do the first research project on the state of innovation throughout distribution, and this book, Innovate, How Successful Distributors Lead Change in Disruptive Times. And then the model of the innovative distributor. From there, COVID happened, and that led us to what we're doing now as well, and that's We Supply America. Hopefully that was not
absolutely terrific. So yeah, you are known as the innovation guy.
Okay, thanks.
In distribution. And so it's interesting that your perspective is that there's a need for it in distribution, as you're saying that it's passed a lot of distributors by. You see that starting to shift at all? Are you
without question. You know, I do believe when we did this research project with the NAW, you know, the data said, and I won't get the number exactly right, Jonathan, but something like 85% of leaders throughout distribution back then believed that the pace of change in their business was too slow. 70% believed that they were using outdated business models, if you will. And now, you know, certainly your work, certainly the work with Mark Dancer, Mike Marks, certainly what we brought to the market with this thinking of Innovate, the whole need for change, transformation, and innovation has been heightened. And I think the case studies out there are absolutely fantastic what's going on. And I think the pandemic absolutely proved to us that we can change. We can change, and we do change when necessary.
So we found we were more nimble and agile than we knew.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? I think a black swan event like the pandemic will do that. And here's a premise I have on that. And it's just starting to think with some current research we're doing, Jonathan. You know, I use the word heroic. I really believe that the way distributors pivoted during the pandemic was truly heroic, because what did they do? The first thing we did is we focused on our people, right? We focused on our people, ensured their safety, their health. It was taken care of mentally and physically, right? Mm-hmm. And then we took care of our business. And how we pivoted was absolutely heroic in how fast it was done, right? And in hindsight, you think about why we were able to do that. And I think one of the reasons is because that's the way we had to change and pivot and solve problems on the spot is really, to a degree, what we do every day, mm-hmm. right? We have a busy, complex business, and the problems of the day we are very good at solving.
Mhm.
And that's what we do.
That's how we supply America.
That's how we supply America. Exactly. Thank you. And that's what happened. If I have a not a concern, but if I think you and I need to continue to have conversations with people, it's we have solved the problem of the pandemic. Let's not get too comfortable. Right? Let's not, because look at your financials. Look at your numbers. You've had some good years, right? And that lulls, again, complacency. And I think now is an opportunity, right, to double down on innovation. Now is an opportunity to double down on thinking for the long term and developing the strategies as such.
So before we shift into the broader discussion around how we're going to do that, first of all, I want to say, Dirk, you have been the host for me more times than I can count. So it's really nice to have this trading places thing where I'm the host MC for you. It's great. Second of all, for our listeners and audience, we love questions. And so there's a Q&A button there. And if you toss a question in there, or if you can't find that, chat, we'll try to answer it. We might decide to hold it till the end, but we definitely love questions.
Cool.
So when we think about today's topic, it really is around how leadership is shifting.
Yeah.
And I know that you were influenced by your We Supply America tour. Can you set the stage for us by telling us about that?
Yeah, I appreciate it, Jonathan. I was really influenced by last summer, what I did last summer. And, think back when we first were told 2 weeks to flatten the curve, right, Jonathan? And then that 2 weeks to flatten the curve became, we're entering our second year. Around that time, I wrote an open letter to distributors titled Shift to Tomorrow, talking about lifting our eyes toward the horizon, doing what we need to do to come out stronger. And in that open letter, it was the first time that I used the words, the noble calling of distribution. And think about that. The noble calling of distribution. You're those that are online with us today, we are part of a $7 trillion economic engine, the third largest economic engine on the planet. I find that to be very noble. The 30,000 distributors in this country have created 6 million jobs. I find that to be very, very noble. Distribution, in my mind, is the backbone of this country. And so, as 2 weeks flatten the curve became, we're entering the second year, I had to get the hell out of this office, I had to get out. And so, as you know, I bought an RV, we wrapped it with the theme Resupply America, and I went across the country to champion the noble calling of distribution. 97 days, 35 states, 34 different distributors. And here's the thing. Over those 97 days, those 34 businesses, I got to meet, talk to, learn, and listen to hundreds and hundreds of professionals throughout distribution. And from the warehouse associates to the C-suite and everybody in between. And it's given me, Jonathan, it's blessed me with a unique perspective. And it's given me a perspective that cannot be had through online surveys and research, which is important. We're in the middle of it. But when you get to hug people on the receiving dock and listen to their stories, it gives a unique perspective. And it gave me the opportunity firsthand where the work is being done. It gave me the opportunity firsthand to feel and see how things are changing. And I think overall, there's a lot of lessons. We continue to share them, but two overall premises that I'd love to explore with you today is, number one, through those exposures, the very nature of leadership, I believe, is changing more rapidly than most of us realize. And the second one is that the human element, I really believe the human element in this digital age, the human element is going to be prioritized going forward.
It's so interesting that you mentioned that. There was a website of a company in the electronics space. And first of all, when I mentioned website, you're already thinking digital, right? But their messaging was people and technology. And it was very cleverly done in terms of having access to people and technology. Now, this is from the distributor to the customer. I know you're talking about really internally what's happening within the distribution business. And I think it's easy for us to get caught up in digital transformation whatever part of it is. I mean, it's a big subject. There's a lot of money being spent on that. If we leave out the human element, we're really going to be in a world of hurt. So
yeah. And Jonathan, can I just comment on that? I love that, and we'll talk about that and all that. But I really do believe, and one of the things I took away is that at its core, business distribution. It's a people business. I mean, we could talk about digital transformation. We could talk about our products on our shelves, but in the end, it's a people business. So, and we'll talk about that.
So let's talk about changing nature of leadership. What's going on there?
Yeah. So before we do that, Jonathan, I see that very loud noise from my computer.
Yeah.
Can I just try something real quick here?
Please.
Okay. If there's that noise, and let me see if I can do that. Let me see here.
In the old days, it might have been from your computer.
You're right.
The air conditioned room.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
And does that take away the noise? Hopefully, I made one adjustment. So hopefully
yes, for sure.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Yeah. So, Jonathan, thanks for asking about this changing nature of leadership. Again, I have this premise that I believe the very nature of leadership is changing more rapidly than most of us realize. And so what does that mean? What does that look like? Well, we're in the midst of a research project to prove or disprove that premise we have. And one of the early findings we found is that 77% of us believe in that premise, that the very nature of leadership is changing. And so what does that look like? I love the quote from the futurist Alvin Toffler, who said that the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who don't know how to read and write. He said the illiterate of the 21st century will be those who don't know how to learn, unlearn, and relearn.
That is so deep.
Right?
I love that.
So think about that in the context of leadership on the other side of the pandemic. So at its surface, it's what I think Alvin Toffler was saying, maybe in a post-pandemic world, the illiterate leaders will be those who don't know how to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And so one of the questions we asked in our survey is, do you believe that there are some leadership qualities that we relied on in the past that got us to where we are today? Do you believe that there are some leadership qualities that we relied on the past that we need to unlearn for a post-pandemic world? And 65% of us believe there are some qualities that got us to where we are today as leaders that we have to let go of and relearn leadership going forward. I think it's fascinating.
Thoughts on, or any color on what some of those things are?
Yeah. Yes. I have some anecdotal from being out 97 days, 34. But as I'm going through this research, what's coming out loud and clear are things like autocratic leadership. Things like fear, control, and micromanaging. Things like top-down, unilateral decision making without getting buy-in from the organization. Things like, go ahead.
No, you please go ahead.
No, things like flexibility, right? Things like, this is how work was done. You're going to conform to it. Well, post-pandemic world, we got to unlearn that. And there's more. So it's really fascinating when we think about it this way in my mind.
Yeah, it's so interesting. When you and I were preparing for the show, we talked about another episode we had with Randy Eddy, the CEO of US ESI. And what Randy has done is actually try to quantify even some of the buzzwords you described. So they have this cultural values assessment where every employee, or as many employees as they can get to participate, will select from a set of words that describe their experience at the company. So words like information hoarding, some of the words that you mentioned, obviously there's things on the positive end of the spectrum as well. And what they found was, as they started listening and then responding to this cultural values assessment. I'm guessing they do it semi-annually, maybe quarterly, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They started listening to it as they started responding, saying, look, you, Mr. or Ms. Branch Manager, here's the feedback from the employees in your branch.
Yeah.
Here's what you need to work on. Their cultural values assessment total score came up, and guess what else? Their profits came up, and it correlated perfectly as they started paying attention to culture. So
they've got the data that says pay attention to culture, pay attention to how your employees are thinking, feeling, behaving, work on those things, and it impacts not only the culture but the profitability of the business. It's fascinating, and I think in my mind, that's part of the second premise we have is the human element. I mean, just the very nature of what you said, listening like that to the employees.
Mm-hmm. That's
part of this human element, isn't it, Jonathan?
100%.
Yeah, and I think in years past, I don't think it. Maybe we needed to do it as much, but the leadership styles didn't lend to it, to doing that. So, part of this premise of how leadership is changing, right? So, what was it? 65% of us believe that we need to unlearn some things that we talked about. As I look at leadership in general, Jonathan, I think as we think about leadership in this post-pandemic world, I think there's 4 stages. The way my mind is thinking right now, there's 4 stages of leadership. And those 4 stages are controlling, managing, leading, and then this 4th stage coming out of the We Supply America tour is what I'm calling the noble calling of leadership. And controlling is some of those things we just ticked off that we're hearing in the survey, the research that we've got to unlearn. Controlling was when management led by fear, when we policed activities, when we legislated activity. And by the way, that worked. It worked in the past. That gave way to managing, where we're managing, we alluded to it earlier, where we're managing the current processes. We're managing the day-to-day. We're getting the work that needs to get done today, and we're managing that incremental improvement, if you will. But it's all about, we've got the processes in place, let's get it done, right? So from controlling to managing to leading, and leading is, things we talk about, vision, the need for strategy, the need for culture, and the like. And while that's still in place, I think coming out of the pandemic, I think we're going to be talking more about, again, what I'm calling this noble calling of leadership, where we're going to be talking about things like purpose and impact and helping individuals fulfill their potential. One of the things I wrote down is we've talked about a long time work-life balance, right? I don't know if this is semantics or not, Jonathan, but it's just something I'm thinking. Do we just need to, is that going to be changed from work-life balance to life-work balance? I don't know.
Interesting.
I don't know.
Well, certainly people's expectations about employment have changed. And I grew up in the tech industry, as you may know, and many of the things that we took for granted in the tech industry, flex time, working remotely, now the rest of America is saying, yeah, we not only want this in a job, we require it in a job. And I will take some cut in compensation to have that now what you call life-work balance.
Yeah, right.
To be able to work remotely.
I was on a call yesterday, part of this research with the CEO, and he was fascinating. I got to dive into it more. And he thinks the number one disruptive force that we're going to have to focus on as leaders is this multi-generational change that's happening, but the values that are evolving as a result of those multi-generational changes. And I think he's right. And I think we all need to drill down on that deeper and what that means.
And is the generational change, that's a lot of souls. Is that more pronounced in distribution? People are hair color and quantity retiring. Does it look like other industries?
Well, I'll focus on distribution. And again, what's coming out loud and clear from this research is this early retiring of the baby boomers as a result of the pandemic, right? The shift is absolutely happening faster than most of us had planned for, right? And again, we have to understand then what that means, not only from the number of employees we need and the jobs that we need to fill, but as these generations are coming in, their expectations, their demands, their values are different than those who are leaving. Let me, if you don't mind, let me go tying into that. You know those 4 stages that I mentioned of leadership: controlling, managing, leading, and noble calling? Again, some data is coming out of this research that, again, is fascinating to me, okay? So, and I'll see if I can share this in a way that we can. So what the data is showing, telling me this, that leaders in distribution today believe that 49% of distributors are leading in that managing stage, and 41% are leading in the leading phase, and only 6% in the noble calling phase. Okay, Jonathan? That's today. When I asked, how do they expect we're going to have to lead 5 years from now, okay, on this other side of the pandemic, there was a 41% shift in that noble calling. So it went from 6% or so to 47%.
Wow.
And so there is an absolute shift. We're realizing that this change, these generational changes, what's going to be expected of leaders, is absolutely shifting rapidly. And we have to get our arms around what that shift is, what that means, and how it means we're going to be leading going forward.
Fascinating. I hope you're going to be doing some kind of annual or biannual benchmark on this. Are you?
That's our plan. Absolutely,
Wow.
is our plan.
Phenomenal. Love to hear the read on that. We've got a couple of great questions queued up here.
Yeah.
And I think we'll stay in this changing nature of leadership topic, but what is the future of and/or the ability to leverage the physical presence? What is Dirk hearing from those he visited? So I'm guessing that this is in contrast to the digital presence, right?
Yeah. So ask me that again. So what
is the future of and the ability to leverage the physical presence
of people, I guess, huh?
I'm thinking branches and corporate, but maybe people as well. I mean, I think they all go together. Buildings, we just got clarified. Buildings.
Got it. So I love the concept from a futurist by the name of David Hooley. And way before the pandemic, he wrote about the obliteration of place. And you think about that. And what he's saying is that historically, societies, businesses have been based on the premise of being in a location. And our entire worldview and models of business have been built upon place, being on that corner, if you will, having your people come to that corner, having your customers come to that corner.
Location.
But way before the pandemic, he saw that place was becoming less relevant, right? And I think that's a great framework for us as leaders to take forward. Because we did find that in the pandemic, that place is becoming less relevant, right? That our employees could in fact be productive from wherever they are in the world. Amazon proved to us, right, that you didn't need to be on the local corner, right? And they could still get the product shipped quickly. So I hope that brings some thinking to the question. So physical locations are absolutely critical, but just bring to your strategy discussions within your organization this concept of the obliteration of place, and what does that mean for your strategy going forward.
And I would add that there needs to be a balance there. So I'm on the advisory board of a company that is entirely virtual.
Okay.
There are specific challenges in creating and evolving a culture and providing that noble leadership. The concept of management by walking around, right? That's a term we know, MBWA.
Right.
That's got a different meaning in this digital world. And so building that culture is a challenging thing.
Are there one, two, or three things that you've seen this company doing effectively to foster that desired culture with the remote workforce?
It's in process. I mean, we've just noted this as an issue.
Yeah.
It is a business of Zoomers, right? That's the
Yeah.
opposite end of us boomers.
Yep.
It's a business of Zoomers, and so they naturally swim in that lane, right?
Yeah.
But there are some challenges. So I don't have the answer yet.
Three things come to my mind just thinking. To me, vision, purpose, and communication. Right? Those aren't the answer, but to me are probably part of the conversation we need to have in this remote environment. We're going to need to be aligned around a common cause, if you will, right? That really holds us together. I think vision is important to that. Purpose. There's got to be real meaning in the work that the people do, I believe. And then communication. We're going to have to completely rethink what strategic communication means to leadership in this world, I believe.
I agree. And I think the answer varies if what you're dealing with is bits and bytes versus packages, right? So if what you're dealing with, if your business is about bits and bytes, you have a different problem than the one where you're moving packages around. And so there has to be some physical presence. It's hard to imagine a distributor without any physical presence, right? It doesn't make sense because there are physical goods that are being moved around.
You bet.
I would add one other thing about the physical presence, which is we've seen a number of major distributors start to close physical presence, to close branches. And I think the branch actually ends up being a point of differentiation relative to the digital disruptor, right? That's where, you mentioned this relationship. It's about people. That's where people deal with people. Yeah. And the pure digital disruptors don't have an ability to do that.
Yeah, I would agree. That certainly is a competitive advantage that we can and should leverage. Agreed.
Got another question. What are the top 3 to 5 common elements that the distributors are asking or talking about during the visits? What's sort of the consensus? What's keeping them up at night thinking about?
I think we've talked about some of them, right? Well, obviously there are the supply chain issues, right? There's inflation, right? There's the Great Resignation. Mm-hmm. There are those headline things that are keeping everybody up at night, right? I do think, again, from our research, I think this issue of culture, this issue of people, this issue of how do we create an aligned team in this new world is something that I'm finding in my research is keeping people up at night, really thinking it through.
And who owns that in an organization? Who should own that last thing that you described?
Yeah, I think culture is owned by leadership, right? It's certainly owned by leadership, but who then is responsible? I mean, where does the rubber really meet the road? It's at that middle level, right? They're the linchpin. They're the linchpin to the organization, right? So I think the ownership belongs at that leadership level. It's executed every day and thus owned, right, at that middle management level.
Brilliant. So as we shift into talking about the human element, maybe even before we go into that, in these companies, are you seeing, VP of HR, CHRO? If so, what size, or how would you characterize the companies that have it versus the companies that don't?
Yeah. So I believe, Jonathan, there's an opportunity to change our mindsets around this topic going forward. The term human capital, the term human resources. Just stop and think about those terms.
It's very objectifying, right?
Yeah. And I believe we need to absolutely shift our mindset and obliterate the term, our people are our greatest assets. I mean, think about that. We've all accepted that as a truism.
Mhm.
But what are we saying when we say our people are our greatest assets? The definition of an asset is that it is a commodity that can be transferred, at will, if you will.
And it also has a depreciation schedule.
And it has a depreciation schedule. And you know what? Our people shouldn't depreciate.
Right.
Our people should appreciate, right? And so I really believe there's an opportunity for us to change that mindset throughout distribution. Our people are not our greatest asset. Our people, in my opinion, are human beings with dreams, with goals, with God-given potential. And I believe leadership today is focused on developing that potential of their people, not as an asset, but as a person. And I believe that's a significant mindset shift that we need. And when I look at people like Tracy Spanenberg, the Chief People Officer at the Granite Group, and I see how she has shifted her role from an administrator of paper to the developer of people. I think that's a great role model.
Yeah. It's like shifting from a statistical view to an individual and a personal view. Right. When you talk about our people, you're talking about plural, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to talking about an individual.
Yeah.
Almost parallel.
Yeah.
On the customer facing side to, instead of,
That's great.
right, pray and spray, blast everybody, how do we start to do personalization?
Without question. For our employees, right? We all have been customer centric for years, right? And looking at them individually and customizing solutions for them, right? Without question. Do we bring that same thinking to internal, within our four walls, to our people? I think there's great opportunity for that. You don't do that with assets. You do that with people. Years ago, Jonathan, I heard the former coach of the Tampa Bay Lightning in an interview. And one of the things he said is, he says, you want to know what my system is? My system is we have 24 guys on the bench, and I manage, lead, and coach every one of those differently and individually. And I think it's a great mindset for us as we lead our organizations in a post-pandemic world.
Brilliant. So talk to us about some of your observations from your We Supply America tour on the human element.
Yeah, thanks. So first, because I have this premise that the human element's going to play a more important role, we obviously asked that question in our research, and it's proving out. 93% of us believe that the human element's going to play a more important role in the future. So some things that we saw, just a couple anecdotal, if you don't mind. Okay, Jonathan, to start.
Please, yeah.
The very last stop of our tour was down in Dallas, Texas. I stopped at Professional Flooring Service. And one of the first individuals I met there was a gentleman by the name of Polo, who was the warehouse manager. And Polo told me this story, that how in his younger years, Jonathan, he rode a broken down bicycle, delivering newspapers for pennies a day. And what he told me on that warehouse floor is that's where his dream stopped. He couldn't dream of anything more than riding a broken down bicycle for pennies a day. One day, somehow, he made his way to Dallas. He met the owner of Professional Flooring Services. And as he tells the story, the owner of that business believed in him more than he believed in himself. Just think about that. And he gave Polo opportunities he couldn't imagine. And he coached and trained and gave additional responsibility. And Polo talked with such pride of having his granddaughter sit on his lap, telling stories of how he now uses technology that's beyond anything he ever thought he would. He tells his granddaughter how proud he is of being able to manage people now, something he never thought he would do. And I think that's a great story in my mind of what great leaders do and what we do going forward. Believe in our people more than they believe in themselves. Now, Polo had to have the drive. Polo had to take, the opportunities that were presented to him. But to me, that's the human element. And when I walked through these warehouses, probably about the 10th warehouse I walked through, Jonathan, on the We Supply America tour, I tell you, I stopped seeing product on the shelves. I stopped seeing the shelving. I stopped seeing the building. And what I saw was, I believe these distribution businesses, the backbone of this country, are platforms for the personal and the professional growth of our people. That's what I saw. When I talked to Bill Condren, the CEO of the Granite Group, he was going through a visioning process with his team, and what they've defined their vision, their mission is to create a dynamic, durable growth engine for their people. Full stop. Full stop.
Wow.
How many years have we talked about one of the challenges we have as a business is the upward mobility in our business because the boomers are sticking around, right? The growth of the organization, it's family owned. There's nowhere to. We've talked about that for years. Mm-hmm. At the human element, that sucks. Pardon my language. That's bad. Mm. And so I love that thinking that Polo brought to me, and that Bill Condren, building a dynamic, durable growth engine for our people. I tell you what, you do that, and I suspect you'll be ahead of the curve in this great resignation. You'll be ahead of the curve in this challenge of hiring quality people. Because I think that's what people want. People want to fulfill their potential, and they want to be given that opportunity. They don't want a job. They want to grow. They want to develop. And I think that's our opportunity as leaders going forward.
Have you read The Loyalty Effect?
I have not.
The loyalty effect, very simply, is the idea that there's this virtuous relationship. I'm doing the infinity thing with my hands.
Yep.
Between employee retention and customer retention. That as you start to move one, you start to move the other.
Yep.
And
I believe it.
Right. And so I'll send you the HBR brief, by the way. I mean, it's a terrific book by one of the guys from Bain. And they show quantitatively what happens when those things start cooking together.
Yeah.
And so your example from the Granite Group is a great example, right? They are doing just that. Creating happier employees means more fulfilled employees means employees stick around. There's less effect of the Great Resignation, and then then they show what else happens from that.
Yeah, and can I again? This might. And I don't want this isn't pie in the sky. Here's a premise I have, Jonathan, and I don't have quantitative data for this yet. Okay. But you think about what you and I just said, right? Building a dynamic, durable growth engine for our people, helping our people fulfill their potential. That I see platforms for the personal and professional growth of people. Mm-hmm. Here's a statement, and I'd love your input, and everybody in the comments, I would love. My premise is that if we're honest with each other, we, the collective we, have done very good at growing and developing 20% of our workforce. Those in sales.
Yes.
Those in a leadership aspect, right? Those that attend our association meetings, those that go to Texas A&M, those that go to UID, those that attend our Unleash Innovation Summit, those that, in sales, we're constantly training. We've been very good at 20%. But maybe not as good at the other 80%. The drivers, the warehouse associates, those that get the job done in all functions of the business.
And that's where turnover is the highest, by the way.
Right on. And Jonathan, this is where I believe there's a great opportunity, where we change our frame of reference, right? And we changed our frame of reference to this is a platform for growing and developing people. And I think when we do that, we focus not on 20%, growing 20% of our organization, but 100% of our organization. And my premise is, I think you and I, what we want to do is we work like hell to ensure that distributors are the channel of choice, right? And in order for them to be the channel of choice, the business needs to thrive, and every branch needs to thrive. Yes. But what has to happen for every one of those branches to thrive? All 6 million professionals throughout distribution need to thrive. There's leadership, there's the human element, and that, yes, the loyalty effect tells us that if you do that, the business results follow.
Let's talk for a moment about your culture of family,
Yeah.
defining characteristics. I know our audience really wants to hear about this.
Okay. So I came out of We Supply America tour a different person, Jonathan. I did. And, for years, I've heard this thing that we're a family. But what does it mean? Nobody could really quantify it. And that's why over 97 days, I got to see it. So let me digress for a second. Are you familiar with Adam Grant, the organizational psychologist? He writes amazing business books. He sits on the World Economic Forum stage, a brilliant individual. And I've had a chance to work with Adam twice in my career. I mean, just really a brilliant individual. But a couple of, maybe 6, 7, 8 weeks ago, he put something up on social that I fundamentally disagree with. And here's what he said. He said, a company isn't a family. Parents don't fire their kids for low performance or furlough them in hard times. He said, a better vision for workplace is a community, a place where people bond around shared values. So what he's saying is, all this talk about being a family, he says that's BS. Let's start calling ourselves a community in a business. Okay. Brilliant guy. But Jonathan, 34 different businesses I walked into, and I talked to people, and I asked them how long they've been here, and people told me 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. My mind's blown. And I always followed up, man, you've been with this company for 30 years. What has kept you here for 30 years? And you know what? Not once I heard, not once did they say, because we're a community. Nobody said that. I asked, why have you been here for 30 years? And they said 2 things in succession. Number 1, we're not just a number here. And number 2, they said, we're a family. Right? So I really am at odds with Adam Grant's thinking that we shouldn't call ourselves and our culture a family culture. And so when I was out there and I started connecting the dots, I've identified seven characteristics of what really builds this sense of family in these independent family-owned distribution businesses that I went to. And I'll just tick them off real quick. Number 1, there's a deep, deep bond. There's a connection of all employees. There's a commitment to each other, right? Leadership to the employee to leadership, employees to employees. There's dignity. You walk into that business, man, and you know you're important. You know that what you do is important. There's dignity in every single thing that the individuals do across that business. Belonging, we belong to something important. There's value. People see me and value me as a person. And the 7th one, dare I say, Jonathan, is love. There is deep love amongst the individuals in these businesses. And I got to tell you something, man. I think it's time to blow this up in a positive way. And we, I have these Thursday unapologetic live, LinkedIn Live, Jonathan, and I called it unapologetic because you know what? In distribution, I mean, the most humble individuals, right? I love that. But man, I think there's an opportunity to be unapologetic about who we are about the importance of what we do, the nobleness of the work, be unapologetic of the culture we have and the sense of value and the fact that there's love, that there's dignity, the true commitment we have. I think there's an undertold story that, man, we all can rally around individually and collectively as an industry and start solving this great resignation, start solving this inability to attract people to our businesses.
Dirk, I'm really seeing an organizational development type assessment come out of the work you're doing. In other words, that you would be able to create various assessments along the lines of culture, family, your 4 levels of leadership. I mean, I'm yeah.
Do you know a PhD who could help me put that together?
I might. Yeah, I might. This has been amazing. We've got a couple more questions, then I think we're going to move towards wrapping up. Absolutely fascinating talking with you, Dirk. So we have a question. Do you have any specific goals or initiatives the distributors are using to drive value change? So, I mean, you've really covered
to drive value change within the organization.
Within the organization, yeah.
So do we have any examples? Well, one, we talked Bill Condren, right? Developing the entire vision around what they're going to do. That drives everything they do. Another one that continually comes to my mind is Porter Pipe. All right, just follow Porter Pipe on LinkedIn. Today, Nick Porter, the CEO, had an amazing post, and I'm going to paraphrase it. And he talked about, are you valued at work? How do you feel walking into work? And those types of things. And he says, man, if you want to feel great, know that you're part of something. Porter Pipe is for you. So communication and messaging. Once you've got the vision and you've defined your culture, you know who you are and why you are who you are as a company and your values. I think being unapologetic is not wrong. It's not wrong.
So it's the potential to be real.
Yeah, authenticity is.
Authenticity. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Go to the next question. I might come up with another example.
No, I think that's good. I mean, as you get further in this work, I mean, you've really described assessment, diagnostic, where things are.
Yeah.
But I know, given who you are, you're going to be looking at how we go from point A to point B. So.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, authenticity, being real. 94% of leaders in our research tell us that authenticity is going to be an absolute key leadership skill going forward. 94%. So thanks for bringing that up. 98% in our research tell us that commitment to growing and developing people is going to be critical leadership characteristic going forward.
Makes all the sense in the world. Dirk, thank you so much. I want to share a little bit about upcoming attractions here. So
you want me to go down?
Either way, you're beautiful, Dirk. So our next distribution strategy group event is May 18th, same bat channel, same bat time. For those of you who are old enough to get that reference.
You're showing your age.
Yeah, I am. Ian would bust me on that. He's like, well, a lot of our audience doesn't get that. It's like, okay, well, fine. So it's going to be next Wednesday, May 18th. It's how distributors can act now to mitigate supply chain disruption. We had a phenomenal session with Ravi Gautamurthy of the University of Colorado Business School and Ian Heller about a month and a half back. And again, that was more at the assessment and diagnostic. This is at the action level of what you can do to deal with the supply chain disruption. And then 2 weeks from today, we have Eric Gershwin, the CEO of MSC. And speaking of innovation, I mean, he is really doing a lot of innovative things. One of the things he's done, he'll talk about it, is he's transformed his headquarters instead of the standard office type environment. He's transformed it into more of a hotel environment for people who are working remote and coming into work in the environment. But there's much more than that we're going to share with Eric. So that's going to be sponsored by Oracle NetSuite. Next week is brought to us by Esker. Dirk, thank you again for participating. We'd love to have you back when the time is right. If you're not gallivanting about America.
Maybe we'll do it from the middle of America.
Maybe we'll do it from the middle of America. I'd love that. That would be just phenomenal. Okay. You can reach Dirk at Dirk at UnleashWD.com. That's Dirk at UnleashWD.com. I'm going to share his phone number, 847-381-7797. And you can find out more about what he's doing on WeSupplyAmerica.net. Thank you again, and have a great rest of the day, everybody on the call.